So, formation of tissue fluid. Okay, so the first question is, what is tissue fluid? Okay, Chloe, can you tell me what tissue fluid is?
Not what's in it.
No, just not what's in it, not its composition, just what is it? Okay, Katie, can you help her out?
Fluid that surrounds the cells of the body.
Okay, so the fact that around each cell, if you look at the tissues, if you do any kind of surgery, you will see that around the cells there is fluid. Okay, and we do need to know the composition of that fluid, but we also need to be able to explain how it is formed. Okay. And there's something else really important about tissue fluid formation. It is not only formed at the arterial end, but something important happens at the venous end of the capillary bed. Okay? What is that, Scott? What important thing happens at the venous end of the capillary bed?
That's water potential effects, so the water moves back from the tissue fluid.
Excellent, because otherwise by the end of the day we would be a squelchy nest, yes? Okay, so let's start out by showing just one capillary, okay? Now, as I draw the cells of the capillary wall, what kinds of cells are those, Kayla? What kinds of cells make up the capillary wall? Tori, help her out. Okay, begins with E. Endothelial, excellent. Okay, so the endothelial cells make up the capillary wall. Okay, what's important, Matthew, about the shape of these cells?
Short diffusion pathway.
Excellent. So what's the major function that's occurring, Kai, within the capillary bed?
Inside the capillary.
No, in the capillary bed. So when we're thinking about the circulation, we know that the blood leaves the heart in the aorta, then branches into arteries and then into arterioles, and then it branches into many capillaries within an organ. Yes?
Or diffusion.
Excellent.
Cells.
Of what is going to diffuse into the cells?
Glucose and...
Good, okay. And then what is going to diffuse from the cells, Katie, back into the blood within the capillary? Okay, all right. Katie then, when I should have said Kate. Go on.
Like waste products and CO2.
Excellent. So one word for what is happening in the capillary then, beginning with E, would be, Naomi?
Exchange.
Exchange. Brilliant. Okay? And that is what occurs in the capillary bed. So we're looking at exchange. So the formation of tissue fluid and its reabsorption facilitates that exchange. Okay? But it also happens because of the nature of the circulation. Okay? Now, the circulatory system that we've looked at already, and we've done the blood vessels that make up that circulatory system, and we've done the heart as the pump, and the final component of that circulatory system is the blood, is a closed system. Matthew, can you suggest why I call it a closed system?
It's just something to do with the same amount of blood is being pumped around. It's not being lost anywhere.
Okay, it's a series of tubes, isn't it? Yes? And those tubes leave the heart and go all around the body in the systemic circulation, and then they return to the heart. They leave the right side of the heart, we go to the lungs and come back into the left side of the heart. So at no point is there a break in that. It's closed. It's a continuous loop of tubes with a pump in it. Okay? Well, we could say there are two pumps in it. So that's a closed circulatory system. Now, you also have another circulation that is important within animals. And that circulatory system is the lymphatic system. And here, the lymphatic vessels are open-ended tubes. Okay? They're blind-ending tubes. And they form a network that returns the excess fluid that drains from the tissues to the circulation. Okay? So this is not a closed system. It's a drainage system. But you still have valves. What way should I draw the valve? I'll give you two options. You can tell me which one's right. I could draw the valve like that, or I could draw the valve like that. So which one is right? 1 or 2, and why? Kai.
Number 2.
Because?
Because you want it to drain from in.
Okay, so we want the drainage to be in this direction. So it's draining from the tissue. So if the valve is as it's drawn in 2, then it will open and allow flow in that direction, but it will fill the pockets and close to any fluid going in the opposite direction. Now, as I've drawn it on the board, you might think, well, why would it ever flow uphill? Well, why would it ever flow uphill? Chloe, you've got an idea? Well, I might have my arm up, yes? Okay, and then you have gravity working in the opposite direction. I might lie down. I might even do a headstand. You never know, okay? So it has to be able to flow in any direction, all right? Now, well, I lied. It has to be able to flow in only one direction. Therefore, there are valves to prevent it flowing in the wrong direction. Okay, so that we're making a note. Let's make the note here first. So these are lymph vessels. And how would you describe what the lymph vessels do, Kai?
I'm not sure on that one.
You're not sure on that one? Scott, can you help us out?
Do they just drain fluid from the cells?
Okay, so they drain. Yes, we've got this idea that they drain, but what are they draining? Maybe we'll come back to it. Let's leave that, and we'll come back and think about it again later. All right? So, now let's put some reference points on. So this end here is the arterial end, because that's where the arteries branch into the arterioles, and the contraction and dilation of the muscles within the walls of the arterioles alter the blood flow into the different capillary beds. Thank you. Can you remind me of the technical word for reducing the diameter of an arteriole?
Constriction.
Of what? So it is, begins with V. Because you're saying what is constricting?
The vein? Vasculoconstriction. No.
Very nearly. It is shortened down to vasoconstriction.
That's it.
Okay? So vasoconstriction would reduce the diameter of the arteriole. So would that give me more blood flow in that arteriole or less? Less. Thank you, Naomi. So what do I say if I'm going to have an increase in diameter and more blood flow? What's the word for that? Yes, Kai?
Vasodilation.
Excellent. Vasodilation. So those two we need for what is happening about this function. How is the wall of an arteriole different, say, from a vein?
It's got no elastic layer.
Right? Does a vein not have an elastic layer?
Does.
Yes, but there's something different about it. Okay, so if you were to draw the blood vessels, and just a quick sketch, and you were drawing an artery, and you were comparing that with a vein, there are 3 layers, aren't there, in these blood vessels. Okay, so let's label these ones first. That is 1, that is 2, that is 3. Okay, so Naomi, can you give me layer 1, 2 or 3?
The inside one's the endothelium. So
Excellent. So that's the endothelium. Okay, Chloe, 2 or 3? No, because that's still lining ducts and tubes. It's the outer coat. Okay? Alright. And 2, Scott.
That's thick muscle and elastic layer.
Okay, so this is the thick muscle and elastic. So now, looking at it, Tori, how does the layer of muscle and elastic tissue in an artery differ from that in a vein?
it's much thicker.
Much thicker. Okay, all right. So that thickness allows it to behave differently. Now, you talked about the elastic layer, all right? But the elastic layer is not important for vasoconstriction and vasodilation. What is the elastic layer important for, Katie?
Regulation of the blood pressure, because it can expand under high pressure and it will require blood pressure.
Excellent. Is there another word that I might use instead of expand? Stretch. Okay, I think they prefer it. Okay, so stretch would be better. Excellent. So we're now getting our connection. So we've got arterial end this end, and we've got the venous end this end. Okay, so thinking about the way the blood is flowing. Kate, can you tell me what the blood flow will be like at the arterial end when it enters the capillary bed?
It'll be quite high pressure.
Excellent. So we've got high, and what kind of pressure do we call this? How do we describe this pressure? Okay, so we've got high hydrostatic pressure. So we're going to show the pressure as arrows. And we're going to show the direction with our arrow, and we're going to show the relative strength of that pressure as the width of the arrow. So at this end, we've got high hydrostatic pressure, so we've got a wide arrow to show that high hydrostatic pressure. Okay, so we need to think about the composition of the blood. All right. Now, within the blood, there are many proteins. I'm just going to show the proteins as this green squiggly line. Okay. These are very large. What's the significance of the size of these very large proteins? Yes, Katie?
They can't pass through the endothelial wall.
So they won't be able to diffuse through the endothelial wall, they won't be transported by facilitated diffusion or active transport through that wall, and they be able to go through these little gaps. Okay? Yes, Matthew?
Don't they also lower water potential?
Excellent.
Well,
Okay, so we'll come to that in a minute. So we've got two really important roles of these large proteins. In fact, they're able to exert, to produce the water potential effect because they cannot leave the capillary. Okay? So these proteins are too large, okay, to leave the capillary. Now, I'm thinking of three different proteins that we would find in the blood, okay? So take a moment and see how many of those three you can get. So we're looking for three different proteins that we've learnt about, that we know about, that would be found in the plasma of the blood. Okay? So, anybody like to start me off with one? Yes, Chloe? Amino acids, okay? Amino acids are the monomers that make up protein, and they will be in the blood, but they're only a single monomer, yes? So will they be able to pass through into the tissue fluid? Excellent. So the amino acids then, we want to show as going through into the tissue fluid. Okay. So yes, Scott?
Globulin.
Globular. Okay, that's the shape, yes? Globulin.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So you're thinking of an immunoglobulin. Now, the rest of us might know that as a word beginning with A. Kai, would you know that as a word beginning with A? Antibody. Excellent. Now, there's something that students get confused all the time. What is it that triggers the production of an antibody? Also begins with A. Antigen. Excellent. Okay, so don't get those confused. The antigen is what, Kate?
It's on the outside. It's like a, is it like a protein or something on the outside of a bacteria or virus or whatever, and then it makes an antigen and the complex, and then that triggers the production of antibody.
Okay, good. Excellent. Nearly right, okay? So I love everything about it, but the antigen triggers the immune response because it's recognised as foreign by the cells of the immune system, including the phagocytes such as macrophages, which will engulf that pathogen. It's also recognised as foreign by B cells and T cells, and it triggers production of a plasma cell from a B cell that can bind to it. Once that activated B cell becomes a plasma cell, it will then produce antibodies which will bind to that, yes, antigen, okay, and coat it and show the macrophage to engulf it, yes? Okay, good. So, we've got two more. Matthew.
hemoglobin
Okay, where am I going to find hemoglobin?
in the red blood cells.
Okay, so that's not going to affect the water potential effect. And I've drawn this red blood cell too small because it's actually so large that it has to deform to some extent to get through the capillary. Okay, so it's just bigger in diameter than the capillary bed. Can you think of an advantage of this size, considering that it carries oxygen? Yes, Scott?
It forces the hemoglobin closer to the endothelium wall of the capillary, which shortens the diffusion pathway.
Excellent. So that will mean that we're going to get more efficient diffusion of the oxygen. Now, where and why is the oxygen going to diffuse? In fact, which direction is it going to diffuse? Why, Naomi?
It's gonna diffuse into the cell.
Good. Because, why does the direction of the gradient lie in that direction? What is happening in my cell?
Respiration.
Excellent. So we've got respiration occurring in the cell, which is going to mean that it is consuming oxygen and producing, okay, what's it producing, Kyle?
CO2.
So it's producing CO2, so I'm going to have a high concentration of carbon dioxide within the cells, and so they will diffuse in which direction, Tori? The carbon dioxide molecules?
The other way.
The other way. Okay, so they are going to diffuse back into the plasma, and we've forgotten to show something really important, that this blood is actually flowing. Okay, so the blood is flowing in that direction, and that will be important to continue and keep the rate of diffusion high, because, can you explain why the flow of blood is important to keep the rate of diffusion high, Katie? Factors that affect the rate of diffusion. Chloe?
So it maintains the concentration gradient.
Excellent. It maintains the concentration gradient. Okay, so now we've got part of the important exchange that is occurring. Not only will the oxygen diffuse down its concentration gradient easily and readily across the plasma membrane of our endothelial cell and through the cytoplasm, but also it will diffuse into the tissue fluid that surrounds these cells and then cross the plasma membrane into the cells of the tissue. Okay? So, what else are we going to find? Oh, wait a minute, we still haven't got our other two proteins. We need to go back and get those two proteins. Let me tell you the function and see if you can give me the protein. So we've got immunoglobulins, okay? These proteins that are going to be found within the plasma carry cholesterol. One sort is considered bad and one's good. Yes?
High and low density lipoproteins.
Excellent. So we've got HDL and LDL, okay? Another function of blood is clotting. So rather than give it to Katie again, okay, anybody else? Begins with F. This isn't on the spec, so it's just extension. So Katie? No? Okay. Fibrinogen. Okay. Alright, so fibrinogen. What did you tell us about teeth extraction?
There is a product that can be used if the patient isn't clotting very well or very quickly on their own. It's a little sponge called hemofibrin, which you put into the socket and it will form sort of a synthetic clot, which will then just dissolve in its own time.
Okay, lovely. Stop the patient bleeding all over your surgery. Okay? Alright, so we've got the proteins that are there. Their important role is that they lower the water potential. Okay? So where am I going to put the water potential effect and which direction does it work in? What direction does the water potential effect work in? Okay, Katie again?
To move tissue fluid back into the capillaries from the cells.
Okay, so at the venous end, we're going to have a water potential effect in that direction. Do we not have a water potential effect at the arterial end of the capillary bed?
Yes, but in the opposite direction.
You think? In the opposite direction? Okay. Where is my area of high water potential? That's got to be where there's a lot of water and very little solute. And if we're thinking about the capillary, the blood within the capillary, the plasma of that blood has a lot of dissolved protein that can't leave. Okay, so let's look at the composition of the tissue fluid. The high hydrostatic pressure, if we finish this as our first thought, okay, so this is the first step in formation of tissue fluid. The high hydrostatic pressure forces, okay, what's it going to force into the area surrounding these tissues? That will form the tissue fluid. First thing, forces dissolved in the water? We've got one thing already.
Glucose, nutrients, salts,
So glucose,
protein.
protein. Will protein be in it?
Well, not large proteins.
Well, not anything more than amino acid large. Yes? Perhaps, no, I don't even think a dipeptide would get through there. Okay? The gaps are really quite small. They will restrict what can be forced through here under normal hydrostatic pressure. When we come to look at our case studies, we will see instances where the proteins are forced through into the tissues, okay? But that is an abnormal state, not a normal state. So in a normal state, the proteins are too large. No proteins leave the capillary. So they maintain the plasma within the capillary as the area of low water potential, okay? And the area of high water potential will be the tissue fluid, all right? So let's look what we've got here. So we've got water, glucose, salts, minerals, etc. Okay? They're all forced through and they form tissue fluid. Okay, I have just thought of another protein that we should know. Okay, so we've got a fourth one up here. It's really a peptide, and that is insulin. Just to remember that there are also hormones circulating in the blood. Okay, so we've produced the tissue fluid because of the high hydrostatic pressure and because the capillary has these small gaps between the endothelial cells. So that allows the fluid to be forced through, but restricts the movement of the proteins. However, at this end, there will be a water potential effect. Okay? So Scott, can you tell me why, using the idea of the arrows, why you have net formation of tissue fluid at the arterial end?
Basically because the high hydrostatic pressure is higher than the water potential effect. So overall you get water movement and minerals and all that move into the tissue fluid and cells.
Excellent, okay? So I think of that as a greater push than the pull, okay? So you can think of the hydrostatic pressure as forcing that fluid out to form the tissue fluid, whereas the water potential effect is drawing that water back in, okay? So because the hydrostatic pressure is higher than the water potential effect, we're going to have net formation of tissue fluid, okay? Okay, so by the time we get down to the venous end, why are we going to get net reabsorption? Okay? Why are we going to get net reabsorption? What has happened as the blood has flowed through the capillary that means that by the time we get down to here, we're going to have net reabsorption?
Because diffusion happens as it flows.
Yes?
Once it gets to the
Venous end.
venous end, there will be a higher concentration. No, come on. Is this water? Or
Well, a lot of the most quantity of water forms the tissue fluid. So we're going to get a drop in the amount of water within the plasma. Okay? So what will that do to the water potential effect and to the pressure within the capillary? So we've been forcing water out as the plasma flows through here.
So by the time it gets to the venous end, then there'll be a lower hydrostatic pressure.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to show that as a narrow arrow. Okay, so let us put that down. So 3, the hydrostatic pressure drops as the blood flows through the capillary. Due mainly to the loss of water which forms the tissue fluid. Okay, so now we just need to explain how we get reabsorption down this end. Okay? So, Matthew, would you like to have a go at explaining why we get reabsorption at the venous end?
I'm going to say, well, because well, the blood has a very low water potential for a start.
Does it?
But when it gets to that end,
Well, my arrows show that it's about the same. Yeah? Because all the proteins are still there. Yes? So what we're seeing, remember that the water potential effect is due to the difference of water potential between the plasma and the tissue fluid. Yes? So as the blood has circulated through the capillary and water has left and formed the tissue fluid and taken the dissolved solutes with it, this has become more concentrated. Yes? So the difference in the water potential remains. So even though I force liquid out and I've got water coming out here, okay, which will be raising the water potential on this side, I've got less water on that side, more proteins. If anything, what might happen to the water potential effect? This end, I've got water and dissolved solute and proteins and cells. As it goes through this capillary with gaps, these are called fenestrations, but we don't need that word, it's just nice. Okay? So the fluid is forced through under hydrostatic pressure. So the amount of water is dropping. So the water potential on this side is increasing. Okay? I've got water coming into this side, and the water potential will be high on this side because there's a lot of water, and the dissolved solute will be being absorbed into the cell. However, remember, the urea will be going in the opposite direction. Okay? However, there will remain net higher water potential in the tissue compared with the capillary. So that's not the reason why I'll get net absorption. Remember we looked at this end, we talked about a push and a pull. What has happened to my push as I've gone through?
it's weakened.
Okay, so now my push, my hydrostatic pressure is lower, and my water potential effect is now what compared with that hydrostatic pressure?
Greater.
Excellent. So that's what I need to say. Okay? So here I've got a higher water potential effect. You can, if you wish, use osmotic pressure. a higher water potential effect than hydrostatic pressure. So, water is absorbed, let's put reabsorbed, by, Tori? By? Excellent. Lovely. Alright, so now we can return to why we have lymph vessels. Most of the fluid that forms the tissue fluid at the arterial end will be reabsorbed at the venous end, but some may stay within the tissues. If that was allowed to continue throughout the day, then we would definitely be squelchy by the end of the day. Okay? There would be swelling in our feet and ankles and our other extremities.
Don't old people swell in their ankles?
Yes, they do.
They have those little Velcro slippers.
They do. Yes. Okay, we want to look at why that might be the case. What is it that's changing as you age so that you're not getting sufficient reabsorption and you've got excess fluid in the tissues? That condition of excess fluid in the tissues is called, does anybody know? Swollen tissues? Yes? Elephantiasis is a condition where you see it dramatically. Okay, we'll have a look at that in a minute. But it's called edema. Okay, so swelling of the tissues is called edema. If you look on an American website, it wouldn't have the O, it would just have the E. Okay, so excess tissue fluid gives you swelling of the tissues, which is called edema. Okay, so what we want to put here with our lymph vessels is that the lymph drains that excess and returns it to the circulation. Okay? Okay, so are we happy? Good. Alright. Naomi, can you stop that now? We'll leave it up here and I'll let you work on your case study.